few weeks back, I reached out to all you exiles and asked you to give me your hottest Path of Exile 2 takes after the latest slew of announcements. The response was insane, and today I'm going to be platforming the best Path of Exile 2 hot takes. Don't worry, all the bad takes will be platformed at some point, and they will be in a video called The Worst Path of Exile 2 Hot Takes. But today, we're keeping it positive, we're keeping it awesome, we're flowing into the next area of Path of Exile 2 news, which totally is coming out soon because we are 57 days away from Path of Exile 2 early access. That's wild. I'm so excited. I know you are too. Let's get into the best hot takes about Path of Exile 2. All right, so I was beholden to the algorithm here. I am just going to go from top to bottom, talk for a few minutes about each of these, give my reaction to them, and we're going to go back and forth between YouTube, where I asked everyone, and Twitter. I received responses everywhere, including on Discord, and I might platform a few of those too, especially in the worst takes video. But for now, we're just going to start on YouTube. So, top one right here, at Theodore Thomas D2E says, I don't think most people have realized that PoE2 will be a completely different experience than what they are used to. The sheer speed of the gameplay will be brought to a halt, and it is very likely that a good majority of the player base will eventually revert back to PoE1. Wow, that is a pretty hot take right there. I think it's a good one though. It's well thought out. It's not ridiculous like some of the others we're going to see in the next video. And I do think they are partially right. I don't necessarily think grinding your games needs to go for a fast game or a slow game here. I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to make a challenging, engaging game. Meaning they don't need the gameplay to be fast or slow. It can be fast or slow at times, but they want to keep it hard and engaging all the way up until the point where you truly become a god walking amongst mere mortals. Little Guild Wars 1 and 2 reference there, and, you know, Anchorman reference. So, I think that that's what they're going for. I don't think they're trying to intentionally, like, destroy the speed of the game. And I do think, eventually, the speed will probably be around the Path of Exile 1 levels, but the visual clarity will remain intact. I think that's one of the biggest issues with Path of Exile 1, the fact that it is super fast once you get strong, and the fact that visual clarity is trash. In Path of Exile 2, with the way that they are scaling various aspects, such as not shooting 100 projectiles anymore, but 5 projectiles with the power of 100, I think that that is going to lead to a far better endgame experience. On top of that, I do think that this will help progression feel better than it currently does, because if you are challenged for longer and you eventually get to that godlike state, you feel so much better about your character. It's just a wonderful feeling to see it all come together at the end, and if grinding gears can toe that line perfectly, we have ourselves an excellent ARPG upcoming. Another super hot take by Casey C, aka Kraken Null, over on Twitter. I like that PoE2 is focused on the pack-to-pack pulls and that the difficulty is harder in the beginning. Maybe the whole game, just beginning of what we have seen. I also like the loot scarcity. It makes loot feel much more valuable to look at and equip. So two-parter here, let's tackle part one first. Yes, Path of Exile 2 definitely feels more difficult, especially at the beginning, even though the start of Path of Exile 1's campaign is super hard already. PoE2, from what I've played back in March and then in June again, is way more difficult, and you care about how you are progressing through a map, which packs you are pulling. Are you bringing a ton of packs together and trying to fight them all at once? Do you decide to take on one at a time? What are the monsters inside of the pack? You got to think about all these things, and that is wonderful. And remember, this is on your first character playthrough. This will probably change on subsequent playthroughs, not only in the same league, but in subsequent leagues as well, because you will have more knowledge. And in a game like Path of Exile 1 and probably Path of Exile 2, knowledge is power. So I agree with Casey here. Part 2, loot scarcity. Now this is something, again, that I am a fan of sparingly. I do not want what we have in Path of Exile 1. I do not want that. I do not want massive loot explosions that are all pointless. It is merely for the dopamine. Most of the loot does not matter on the ground. I want the loot to matter on the ground. And from what we've seen in Path of Exile 2, a lot of it does matter because of the extra systems that are in place. even if you're not getting loot specifically that you can use for the skills that you're currently wielding, you can go and you can sell it back in town for gold. You can disenchant it for crafting shards and the like. You can use it once trade is up to sell to other players for bases, because bases will be important in Path of Exile 2 because there's no orbs of scouring. I like all that. One thing that I hope that they boost up in the lead up to early access, and maybe this has been happening in the closed beta test, are the currency orbs. I want that to be a more accessible system. I hope we get a lot of currency orbs so we can interact with crafting a lot more than what I have seen before. But we have to remember that ground-based loot hopefully is going to be in a better place. It's going to have better items. There's going to be seeded drops now, and we have other avenues of loot as well. We have merchants, we're going to have rewards, we're going to probably have league mechanics, or we're just going to call them mechanics in Path of Exile 2 because they're from Path of Exile 1 leagues, but not from PoE2 leagues. I don't know, maybe we'll talk about that when we get there. Anyway, I really enjoy this take here, and I think it is a good hot take. Spicy take from JomWick1292. I'm hoping the devs keep the game difficult and don't cave into the inevitable complaints they will receive. I want to actually play a game, not hold rice mount button. Rice mount button? What am I saying? Right mouse button. Yeah, totally right. And this is actually interesting to think about. And yes, I'm going to talk about another ARPG here. If people complain en masse when PoE2 comes out, will we see something like what's happened with Diablo 4, where from all accounts, it is essentially turned back into Diablo 3? Almost all the big creators, almost all the people who played Diablo 3 for a long time and are now playing Diablo 4 are basically saying Diablo 4 is Diablo 3 with a new coat of paint on it. Will Path of Exile 2's developers do that? I don't think so. I don't think so in the slightest. I don't think they'll give in. I think Jonathan Rogers, Mark Roberts, and the rest of the Grinding Games team has done a phenomenal job keeping to their vision while taking honest, good critiques and feedback. And we've seen that not only from the March and June playtests, wherein lots of creators were flown out to LA to play the game, but also from what I see, the closed beta test, they're making tweaks and balance adjustments and the like, and from those new player tests as well, you know, taking people off the streets who have never played a game, taking people who have only played Diablo and that stuff. They've added a bunch of tutorialization, they've changed UI elements, they've done a ton of work there because they are taking the opinions of people who truly are trying to make Path of Exile 2 a better game, and they're upgrading said game, but sticking true to their vision. Seen it with the Flask reversions, we've seen it with the slight loot boost, we've seen it with the boss portal discussion, and I'm sure we're going to see a lot more of it in the early access period, which is going to be wild. Back to Twitter, I had to scroll through a few because there were a few bad hot takes. That's for another video. This is from Gazi. He says, reactive gameplay over proactive gameplay any day. And then somebody says, true, but kind of ironic coming from a minion player. Okay, we know that Gazi thinks that minions are one of the most active playstyles in Path of Exile 1, and yes, he does press a lot of buttons. Still, it's hilarious. And I totally agree with Gazi here. And this all goes back to one of the most controversial changes so far in Path of Exile 2, and that's the whole flask system, and how we only have reactive flasks and not proactive flasks anymore. We don't have stuff like Quicksilvers or Granite flasks or Jade flasks. We have health, mana, we have flasks that remove ailments from us and the like. I think there's also shield flasks, although I haven't seen any of those since ExileCon 2023, so maybe they're not in the game anymore. Gazi's totally right here. I want to be reacting a lot of the time. I don't want to be proactive and pressing 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 for my flasks, or just spamming the same buffs over and over and over again. I want to react to the situations that are unfolding in front of me. And I know a lot of people hate that and think this is a really bad take because Path of Exile it can be a little mindless and you can relax during this mindless activity. I still think you'll be able to relax in Path of Exile 2, even if a lot of the gameplay is reactive, because it's really relaxing in PoE 1 because you're used to it, right? Once you play a game for a while and you get into the swing of it, play it more and you become more accustomed to its systems and the monsters and all the gameplay elements, you just get more relaxed with the game and you're able to turn your mind off and chill and not stress out. You know, this happens in games like Elden Ring or Dark Souls. People get used to that sort of gameplay and they don't stress. FPS games, I mean, those are insanely stressful. When I try to hop into an FPS, because I don't play a lot of them, I get so stressed and it's horrible. I don't relax ever. Dota 2. Man, I can't play that game anymore, even though I have thousands of hours in it, because it stresses me the heck out. I think it always stressed me out, though. I don't think I ever got into a point where it was relaxing. But anyway, I think Path of Exile 2 will turn into that nice Zen state eventually for people, but people are scared because it does appear to be such a shift from Path of Exile 1, where it's very mindless. You're really using the same ability a lot of the time, even through the campaign into endgame and the like. In Path of Exile 2, you might have to think about things a little bit more, and people are scared of that. I don't think it's going to be a rotation type game like an MMO. You know, I've only played Guild Wars 2, Dungeons and Dragons Online. I've not played World of Warcraft, even though I listen to a lot of WoW videos, especially from Mad Season's show. And that game seems like the antithesis of what Path of Exile 2 should be to me. I really hope it doesn't become that, and I don't think it will, but I think some people are scared that it will turn into that because of all the combos and stuff. Did a bit more scrolling on YouTube, and we have another good hot take. It's totally right here. Metax73 said, the #1 complaint is going to be the campaign takes too long to go through from the PoE1 players that finish the PoE campaign in 4 to 6 hours. Well, especially the first time. Oh my goodness, the early access period, the first few weeks after it, maybe the first month or so, is going to be ridiculous because the Grinding Your Games developers predict that this first playthrough is going to take us a substantially longer time than usual because it's brand new to us. But after that, once we get used to it, it should be about the same length as the Path of Exile 1 campaign. But during that opening period, when people get hard locked on a boss, when they don't know where to go, or they're lost on a quest where, you know, just it becomes too hard or convoluted or something, people are going to flood Reddit, they're going to flood Twitter, they're going to flood YouTube comments, there's going to be complete videos, I'm sure, and Grinding Your Games needs to hold strong, right? And I think they will. I think they will. And it will be the job of us, people who, you know, can stay grounded and look at the entire situation and realize, hey, this is a new game, you guys. You're not supposed to finish it in 4 to 6 hours and already be an end game. This happened with Elden Ring's DLC. Once again, a game that I have not finished, but I stayed tuned into the gaming sphere. When Elden Ring DLC came out, The Shadow of the Erdtree, people were so confused that they weren't just able to finish it like that. And that was a DLC to an existing game. This is a brand new game. I feel like the same sort of thing is going to happen. And because there's a lot of unrest in the community already from Path of Exile 1 players about Path of Exile 2, it might be magnified tenfold, which is a little bit worrying, but, you know, we'll deal with it. We'll do it. We'll handle it, guys. Holy, Ross McDougal with a hot take. Dual stick controller mechanics will be the new meta. ARPG with controllers is the far better way to play an ARPG. And then we actually get a comment from DJ Wheat, who's pretty famous right here. Inventory management on controller is a hell no human should endure. I don't know how people do it. Well, Ross, very hot take. You might be right, though. I played PoE2 on a controller after not playing really any games on controller except Hades 1, and I loved it. It was wonderful, and I only got to play it for 4 hours. And I can see with what they're doing with PoE2 and allowing you to swap seamlessly between controller and mouse and keyboard on PC, you might play the combat with a controller and do everything else with a mouse and keyboard. Inventory management, stash management, trading, and all the like. Even though I also thought the inventory mechanics and the UI with controller were actually phenomenal. My wife and I were able to pick it up very quickly. There were a lot of shortcuts to trade between the both of us, to identify items without even needing to go through the inventory itself and play the sort of Tetris. So I'm kind of looking forward to trying this out on a controller. I have the special controller right here that Grinding Gear Games provided to me. So I'm definitely going to be playing that on launch. It even has the Path of Exile stuff right there. There you go, into focus. Yeah, very, very cool. So I'm definitely going to try it on controller and see how it feels. And really console, everything around it bodes well. They finally got the PS5 native client out for Path of Exile 1 2-3 days ago at this point. And from what I've heard from the community, it runs like butter. People are loving it. So I really hope that bodes well for Path of Exile 2's big launch alongside PC on console. Really excited for it. Another hot take by Les Artiste 5IG. Get ready for PoE1 players to become gatekeepers against PoE2 players, similar to WoW Classic. So yeah, this is a very interesting conversation here. What's going to unfold? Because we've seen this play out a few times in the industry with WoW Classic and Retail WoW and Old School RuneScape and RuneScape 3, Guild Wars 1, Guild Wars 2. And it's interesting to see how sequels play out with their prequels or their predecessors, right? I really hope that everybody gets along, but I don't think that's going to happen. And I think a lot of PoE1 players might be a little elitist compared to PoE2. And from what we've seen so far, the big opinion, the majority opinion, or the loud opinion on the internet seems to be PoE1 players kind of bashing down PoE2 players and saying they're the D4 dads, or PoE2 is designed for simple minds and all that stuff, wherein I think they're very wrong on this. I think that grinding your games is simply going for an engaging gameplay experience, an engine upgrade, or a graphical and animation upgrade, a new story, all that, but they're keeping the bones of what Path of Exile is. If anything, I think the new skill system is deeper than the old skill system. You're going to be using a far wider repertoire of skill and support gems. The passive skill tree is going to be larger than before, and it's going to be used to specialize, not generalize. And a lot of builds in Path of Exile 1 do take the same nodes on the Path of Exile 1 skill tree. And then you're not going to have 18 ascendancies or 19 ascendancies. You're going to have 36 ascendancies. And you're going to have so many more base types, and these base types have different implicits, and some grant skills, and the default attack is an actual thing. There's a bunch of other mechanics that are being built in the Path of Exile 2, but it's being brought along with what people see as a dumbing down of the game with the tutorials and the slower combats and them trying to get into a new audience. I think Path of Exile 1 players are so wrong on that. And it's very unfortunate that seems to be the loudest opinion right there when it comes to PoE1 players talking about Path of Exile 2. I really don't hope they become gatekeepers, and I hope once the game comes out, the communities can really join together and people can just play Path of Exile 1 and Path of Exile 2, or just either or, and get along with the other community. I really hope that happens. Holy hot take. It's a good hot take, but I don't agree with it at all, but I will spotlight it here. Alexor TV says, PoE2 is going to be a lot easier to get into and access, maybe even in the end game, D4 style, and Path of Exile 1 players will hate it. Okay, I agree, but I don't agree. Path of Exile 2 definitely is going to get a lot easier to access, obviously. They are tutorializing basically all the intro systems. Skill gems have videos in-game explaining how to use them and different scenarios to even use them in, and what to combo together with said skills. You're seeing on the passive skill tree what the passives are doing to your entire character. The same with items. I'm hoping that they do this for all the other mechanics in the game too, for ascendancies, for crafting, for league mechanics. I hope that they tutorialize everything out and they make things easy to understand. But then, this is where I disagree with this guy. They allow you to dig deep in and branch out. Diablo 4 style, no. The end game is not accessible there. From what I have seen, I have tried to get into the end game so many times, and I watch a lot of different creators, so I know what the end game is. You are essentially running around in the open world, competing, you're just like trying to kill monsters, but lots of other people kill monsters before you do, so you're just really picking up loot in the open world as you blast to endgame, and then you farm the pit, which is just endless, and it's very samey, and then you do nightmare dungeons for some things, and you farm materials to fight uber bosses, but then you like try to share uber boss kills, so they're not even really challenging, and it doesn't seem like a great endgame experience at all to me. It seems all muddied and convoluted, and I think they're not going to go with that style of thing. They're going to make it easier to access said game and understand the game. And then once you get into endgame, it's going to transition into this wide open area where you can just feel around and play exactly like in Path of Exile 1. I think that they understand that they hit a diamond mine with Path of Exile 1's endgame, and they are going to try to replicate it in Path of Exile 2, learning from all their mistakes in the past. You got to remember, grinding gear games, they learn from their mistakes. Obviously, they are not a new studio at this point. They didn't build a game, have almost all the employees leave, and then try to build a sequel to said game. Jonathan Rogers is one of the 3 or 4, depending on how you look at it, founding members of Grinding Gear Games. Mark Roberts played the alpha of Path of Exile 1 as a player and then joined in as QA right around the time the game launched. They are now the game directors on Path of Exile 2. These people are veterans. They understand all the mistakes that they've made, and they're not trying to replicate them in Path of Exile 2. And they're trying to make Path of Exile 2 distinct while taking the best aspects from Path of Exile 1. So I think that PoE2 will be easier to get into, but its endgame is going to be nothing like Diablo 4's or Last Epoch's or any other game out there for that matter. It's going to be expansive because Grinding Gear Games knows that is where they take your soul. It's endgame. Your soul is Chris's or Jonathan's or Mark's or just GGG's as a whole if you make it to their endgame system because it is so darn fun. Okay, we've got one last good hot take here from Isrees. It's a long one. I'm going to read it all out. I think when the early access releases, it will have a few massive problems that will take significant amount of time to figure out and fix. As we've seen before, the devs are cooking, but some ideas they have will be unanimously hated by the actual players. We've seen it both with PoE1 and PoE2. Some systems they come up with get hated by the majority of people, and later they get changed. Like them going back on no flask charges from normal mobs in PoE2 after the LA event, where most people I watched complained about that whole system, even though it felt like they were really talking it up and dropping an absolute ton of new content and features. And some of it, I'm sure, will be some really weird stuff that will be absolutely hated, even if the devs internally thought it's a well-made and cool idea. And I'm afraid that if there's enough problems like that, it can really turn off a lot of players that are checking out the game on the early access release. Judging from personal experience, if the first impressions are rough and had some major problems, I'm much less likely to give a game another chance. Totally agree with Isrees here. I do think that there are going to be big problems, and I think Grinding Gear Games is going to actively pursue and fix those problems at a rapid rate. Okay, I'm going to pull up something right now. I am open on the version history of Path of Exile 1. Right here is the Path of Exile 1 closed beta patch history. They were releasing patches at such a rapid rate, fixing so many different things, introducing new pieces of content, listening to player feedback, resetting the passive skill tree, doing monster balance, all this stuff consistently throughout the closed beta. And then once we went into open beta, the same exact thing happened. These developers did not rest. They knew if there was a problem with their game, they would need to fix it immediately, and they would need to respond to player feedback. They have a very good pulse on what is right and what is wrong, and when the community really does have a good handle on things. And I think that in early access for PoE2, same thing's going to happen. And if there are major problems, Grinding Gear Games is going to work tirelessly to fix it. We got to remember, these developers are the only ARPG developers and the only developers I can even think of that will release their updates consistently on the best time for the majority of their player base. Fridays at nighttime, essentially, or after the workday. For me, it's Fridays at 4:00 p.m., which is usually when I try to get off work. And that is Saturday morning for them in New Zealand, but they know that that is the best time for their players, and they want to make their players happy, okay? Because at the end of the day, it will make them a lot of money, right? I think the same is going to happen with Path of Exile 2's early access. Yes, there will be problems. That's why it's going to be an early access and not 1.0. They still know that they're going to probably hit six-digit player numbers just on Steam alone with this early access launch. They're going to be watching. They're going to be adjusting stuff very quickly. And I think because we've had such an extended testing and development period, remember this started in 2017, widespread testing started in 2023. there will be fewer bugs than we expect and fewer major issues than we expect, but they will still exist. I think they will be fast enough that it won't do a significant amount of damage to the community, and we will just be impressed at the end of the day. Maybe that's my copium take. Well, Exiles, that was a super fun video to record. If you liked me going through those takes and highlighting responses, make sure you let me know in the comments below, and I might do another episode on this with good takes, I think are good takes, either from those community posts on Twitter and YouTube or from the comments on this exact video. I'm also going to do a worst takes video because there are some unhinged takes out there, such as Jonathan completely jumping ship once Path of Exile 2 launches and leaving the company entirely. There are some crazy takes out there, you guys. Make sure, if you like my content and would like to support the channel, to hit the like button and to subscribe to Talkative Try. That is free for you to do, and it massively helps the channel grow. I really want to propel up into something phenomenal in the lead up to Path of Exile 2's early access release and beyond, and I need your support to do that. And if you'd like to monetarily support me and maybe help me transition to something a little bit more official, you can check out my Patreon or become a YouTube member for as little as $1 per month. I greatly appreciate it. Anyways, my fellow exiles, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one, or the one on screen right now. Talkative.